very much for your invitation to be here today. It's lovely to see some familiar faces and also to see some new faces. My goodness, you do some fun things and you do some incredible work, and the community is very much the better for it. So thank you on behalf of the community. And clearly you've all got a pretty good sense of humour. But I thought I'd start off by just giving a brief overview of the journey and then finishing up with the role that I've just recently retired from, which was a huge decision. But as Ken was saying, I'm married to Steve. I think many of you might know my husband, Steve Ross. He was a policeman for 36 years. And we have 5 daughters, 4 of them are married, and the 9 grandchildren, and they live in Wagga. They've moved to Adelaide and Sydney and Kalgoorlie and Perth, but come back here. And our career girl has been living in Spain for the last 6 years, which has been a fantastic experience, but a little daunting at the moment. So the move to Wagga, we married in 72, and in 1974 we thought, Steve wasn't really keen on Sydney. He was working at the CIB at Surrey Hills. I was working with the Department of Shipping and Transport on Milson's Point, beautiful view of the city, great job. But he didn't really like Sydney. We thought, you know, we bought a block of land, going to build a house, but let's go to the country for a couple of years just for some fun. And I often wondered what made me think about doing that. But I think for me, as a child, I'd had a couple of holidays to dairy farms in Nabiac and Singleton of family and family friends, and they'd been such a wonderful experience. I think that somewhere in my thought process was that the country was a pretty fun place to be. So we headed down here in 74. Oh my goodness. I left shipping and transport with my 180-degree view of Sydney Harbour. I got on that plane with the pressure cooker under my arm because every new bride needed a pressure cooker. And I remember the plane door opening February and thinking to myself, who turned the oven on? Steve, I had to start the job that I'd taken a transfer, and I was working for the Air Commodore and the Wing Commander at the RAF base, and it sounded very prestigious. It was at the end of a hangar, there were no windows. That was another experience. Great fellows, but that was an interesting experience. But so we thought, oh, our best man had a brother who had a dairy farm out in the old Miranda Road, and he said, look, we've got a place you can rent. We thought, well, that'll be fun. 1974. Malibu Hill, Old Miranda Road. I think we had all our things out there, just about to go out ourselves in the flood. That's okay, we can move the stuff out. It's 1 in 100 years, it's not going to happen again. I think it's the only year that it did happen again. So I never got the horse. My husband said he's got a nag, but I never got the horse. And so into town we came. So I had to take a bit of demotion in the transfer, but I was really pleased that I did, because in those days, if your husband was in the defence or in the police and you were young, you know, you're going to have kids in a couple of years, and employment could have been quite challenging to get your foot in the door. So over the next 2 to 3 years, I moved from the RAF base, Department of Agriculture out the college, Housing Department and Health Department. And that started my love of health. I worked for the Regional Director of Health, Chris Mooney, who was an amazing fellow. And I just had started having children then. We'd been married about 7 years. We thought, oh, maybe we should have some kids. And I used to teach at TAFE at night time. I then had 2 children, and I planned to just do night work at TAFE, and I got a call from Wal Fife, who at that time was Minister for Aviation and member for FARA, offering me a job as a research assistant, and I took that, and it was fantastic, so I did that for a couple of years. We'd been in Wagga 12 years then, we're nicely settled, got the new house, everything's furnished, everything's wonderful, and Steve's due for promotion, time to go back to Sydney. And by that stage we were like, we don't want to go back to Sydney. You know, the 2 year stint, I was promised we were coming for a 2-year stint. How often have we heard that story? And so we thought, okay, what are we going to do now? So there was a vacancy at Temora, and Steve goes, oh, look, I think I'll just resign. I said, look, let's just give it a go, you know, let's give it a go and see what happens. And we had a fabulous time out there. We're out there for 12 years too, it seems to be the number. I started off doing some TAFE teaching there. Then I'd work in Wal's office over at Coonamunra when his secretary was on leave. I worked for Brian Carlfeld. I don't know how many of you know Brian Carlfeld, amazing guy. I've been very, very fortunate to work for some really incredible people, and Brian would be up there with them, as well as Wal. Smart guys, great operators. I worked for the Northern Riverina County Council for a while, and then I took a job at the Temora Community Centre as a coordinator. And it was working with disadvantaged groups and getting funding, doing projects, getting emergency relief. And as it happened in Temora at the time, an election came up at local government, And a farming friend we had said, Joy, you should run, you should go. I said, we haven't been here long enough, no one knows me. That came and went. And then there was a by-election, and this same friend turned up with all the paperwork filled out and the pen in hand. He said, just sign the bottom. So I signed the bottom and I got in. And I think I might have run against 3 other fellows. And I'm sure it wasn't Joy Ross. It was just time for a change. There'd never been women on Temora Shire Council, and I think people thought, let's give her a go. So wasn't that an experience? So I turned up at local government, thinking you'll change the world, and you learn very quickly about committees and membership and playing nicely. But it was an amazing group of guys. I thought some of them were fairly interesting when I first joined, but I think it's fair to say over the 6 years that I was on council, I learned a lot and they learned a lot. So they tried to put me on library and parks and gardens, and I thought, hang on there, I'll go on roads hierarchy, I'll go on any other asset committee, any other finance committee. So I think I found myself on every subcommittee there was. But, and then shortly after being elected to local government, I fell pregnant with baby number 5. That wasn't quite in the plan. But thank God she was this fantastic little baby who just came to meetings, because meetings were in the afternoon, and then you'd go to dinner after with the fellows. And I think they were a bit hesitant. They must have, well, you can imagine, they're probably thinking, this is going to be interesting, our usual dinners with this woman turning up. And I'll never forget one dinner, because we were living in the police residence at the time, which wasn't far from the council chambers. And I put something up, and they really poo-hooed it. And I was really annoyed. Not that I didn't get the support, but the fact that they didn't take it seriously. Anyway, I stormed home, I walked in the door, and Steve goes, oh, what's the matter with you? They're a bunch of morons. Anyway, I sat there for a while, and I thought, actually. So, got myself together, went down to the club. Here they are, sitting all having dinner. I walk in the door, and they go, oh, glad you came. I said, well, you're really lucky I did. You're a bunch of morons. But, we could have a laugh, and they were a fantastic council. Everyone had different politics, but you voted on the issue. It didn't matter who was Labor, who was Liberal. You voted on the issue. I might vote with you this week, I might agree with you on the issue next month, but it was a really fabulous council. They had no childcare in Temora, and I remember thinking, for someone like me who was lucky enough to find a fabulous nanny in Temora, who would come and fill the gaps between Steve's shifts and what I was doing, it could be pretty difficult. And there was no funding for childcare in those days, and there was nothing at all in Temora. So I found out that West Wyalong had a grant for family daycare at a time when money was getting out pretty readily. So what I ended up doing was joining with them. We got the funding, the council supported it, and it's still running. Family daycare, still running, and the private childcare centres open since. I also found myself on the hospital board, and it was interesting. You know what little country towns are like, for those of you who might have lived in them? The same people on the hospital board, the people who are on the council, or the people... But I felt it was very, very fortunate. I was very blessed to have the opportunity of working at council, in the community with disadvantaged groups, in the area health service, and you could really, it gave you grassroots information that you could actually use. And then I found myself in the local Community Services Association in Sydney, the Health Services Association in Sydney, and for a city girl who was living in Temora, it was great to be able to keep that connect with the bigger picture. So 12 years later, Steve had been commuting back to Wagga for a couple of years, so I got elected a by-election, re-elected the general election. The next election I lost through a handful of votes. I was chairing the area health service at the time, and the decision was made to remove some hospital beds from Temora. I was about as popular as a pork chop in a Jewish butcher shop. But good things come out of bad things, and it gave us the opportunity to move back here, which was fantastic. So I sold real estate for a couple of years, I did regional planning for a government department, I worked at the Division of General Practice recruiting GPs, and then I saw this job, which I'm kind of leading up to, was a coordinator of the Physicians Recruitment Task Force. In December 2003, a group of people from the Area Health Service, Calvary, Jared Carroll, met, and they realised we needed more physicians. We needed to retain the ones we had and recruit more. And they got together and decided that they'd have a one-year project where they would recruit someone who would drive that project, and I got the position. So we had to, so that committee has senior executives of Calvary, Regional Imaging, which is now called IMED, the Area Health Service, and Jared Carroll. So the action was, the project was jointly funded by Calvary and Regional Imaging, but over the years, Council have been supportive, and we now have heads of agreement with University of New South Wales, Notre Dame University, Council, Calvary, IMED, and it's been really fantastic. The target in the first year was to recruit 2 physicians, and we were lucky enough to recruit 4. So they could see the benefit, so they decided to extend and expand the project. Our initial focus was on cardiology, medical oncology, respiratory, neurology and general medicine. What we did was to go to annual scientific meetings, and they're the key meetings for different specialty medical groups where they all get together. So you have international people and you have Australian people at these forums. So that sort of, we found ourselves attending forums at Brisbane, Canberra, Coffs Harbour, Hobart, Melbourne, Perth, London and New Zealand. So my role as the manager was identifying good potentials about relocation, identifying and helping professional opportunities for their partners, finding school and childcare for their children, helping them find a home, making social connections, establishing their practices and promoting them to GPs and specialists in the region. To date, we've recruited about 100 medical specialists. That's a bit of an embellished amount. That includes some visitors and some locums. But it's fair to say that we have recruited 100 medical specialists to join the ranks in Wagga. And I think it's fair to say that Wagga would have more specialists than any other centre outside Sydney and Melbourne. So the specialists that we've recruited include anaesthetists, intensive care physicians, obstetricians, gynecologists, ophthalmologists, paediatricians, pathologists, physicians. And the physicians, I don't know if you know what a physician is, but it's a subgroup of doctors like cardiology, endocrinology, gastroenterology, general geriatrics, haematology, infectious disease. And the infectious disease we've never had in Wagga before and has come incredibly handy since COVID. Medical oncology, nephrology, neurology, interventional neuroradiology, respiratory, sleep, rheumatology and psychiatry.
I think I've seen all of those guys.
I've seen all of them. I haven't finished. Radiation oncology, rehab, and a whole bunch of surgeons. I think what we're finding is you need that exposure to Wagga. So we try really hard. The local doctors here are fantastic. They mentor these guys as they come through in their training. But often the specialty training takes them back to the city. So it's great having University of New South Wales who train, and there's a new medical school that's just opened this year. So we're now training from year 1 to year 6 of doctors, and Notre Dame does postgrad students. So we've got great exposure at that level. But then they can do GP practice, which is about 2 years, in a centre like Wagga, but they can't do specialist training. They have to go back to Sydney, and that's where you often lose them. So we're trying very hard, as much as we can, to get more doctors training in specialty areas in Wagga as well. So why were we successful? I'd like to say it's my good looks and personality, but it's not really. It's the fact that we've got fabulous doctors. We've got the largest private hospital, Calvary, in regional New South Wales. We've got a fantastic new public hospital, and there are fantastic opportunities. All the doctors that we've recruited work across public and private. And I think the commitment of the stakeholders has been instrumental. The collaboration between the public and private hospital, which is really quite unheard of in other centres. Flexible working options for the doctors, and tailored support for the families. The families are as important as the doctor, they're really critical. And I think some innovative marketing. So we've now got 120 medical specialists who service a catchment population of about 350,000. I think the whole project and the recruitment of these doctors, it's extended the medical services infrastructure in Wagga and the region, it's improved community health, it's attracted new businesses, professionals and skilled workers, it led regional medical training as a future, and it's very much a growth industry. So, open any questions.
Could you go through that group again?